As full-time travelers, one of the most time-consuming things we do is to plan our destinations. Now, granted, it's one of the most fun things we do, but it also is really time-consuming. And our transportation budget, getting from one place to another, is one of the biggest expenses that we incur.
In this video, we'll be walking you through our strategic planning process, the personal choices we make when we decide which countries to go to, the reasons why we pick which order the countries, and in the end of the video, we're going to take you through the costs to get from place to place.
I'm Judy.
And I'm Kevin. Welcome back to Finding Gina Marie, where we share our lives as full-time travelers and the connections we make along the way.
We're excited to be doing our first ever live stream, and it's going to be held on Christmas Eve. So if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, you're going to want to do that because all of the details will be in there. Now let's dive in.
We have a spreadsheet we use for all of our trip planning, and you can grab your own copy for free from the download section of our website. If you already have a copy, we revamped it just a week ago or so, and you might want to download again to have the latest version.
One tab has all of our transportation planning, and we keep track of all of our details there. Another tab has our accommodations. The third tab is for tours, but we don't typically book those much in advance, unless we're doing excursions that require significant advanced planning.
We also spend a lot of time with our bucket list tab. That's the one where we plot out all the places we want to visit, but also the ones that viewers like you recommend to us. We add them to our wish list along with the best times of the year to visit them, and also rank them by how expensive the destination is, so we can figure out if they fit into our plans for the upcoming year. There's
also a few other tabs in there for budgeting that might be helpful for you.
So where do we begin?
I typically will open up the accommodations tab of our spreadsheet and start there. I go in and put in the details that I know. I'll start planning the year just on paper, including the dates that I think we might want to visit a destination, just so I can have an overview of how the year is going to be looking. It also helps me to get a sense of how one destination to another is going to flow into each other and what time of year we'll end up being in a particular place.
We're also looking at gaps, right? Trying to make sure that the year is filled out, we're not missing anything, so we end up leaving one place, and how do we get to the other place? It's really important.
There are several different criteria that we use in planning our travel.
The first one is bucket list destinations. Then knowing our priorities. Then budget, crowds, and peak pricing. Number 4 is good weather. We have to deal with Schengen rules. And we're also trying to work geographic arbitrage to our advantage.
We're putting the final touches on our 2025 travel planning, but if you have can't miss destinations that you think we should be thinking about, we'd love to hear about them in the comments.
Let's start by talking about our bucket list destinations. We have way too many places that we want to visit every year, but we do try to factor in things like, well, will it work with weather? Will it work with location? Are we heading from this point to that point? What are the big rocks that we can fit into this year and maybe shove some of the rest to a future date?
So we had a lot of ideas, but we narrowed down 2024. We knew we wanted to go to Southeast Asia. We wanted to go to specifically Japan. We wanted to hit Morocco, Spain, Italy, and also South America.
It's a lot. So let's talk about these priorities and how we build up our travel. We use big rocks to start. As the old analogy goes, if you don't put the big rocks in first, you'll never have room for them later. So we make sure those are in place. One of the first things we look at is visiting the US. We try to do at least once per year, and we typically plan a visit when we're transitioning between countries.
And the reason we do that is that spending time with family and friends is really important to us. And we also account for special events or meetups. We also try to factor in if there's someplace special that we each want to be for our own birthdays. And also if there's somewhere special that we want to spend our anniversary, which we just had, and also Christmas and New Year's Eve.
My birthday's in May.
Mine is in September. And last year we spent it in London and we went all out. So although I was turning 60 this year, I didn't really have a preference for where we'd be. So we didn't really factor that in. Crowds, peak pricing, and budget are obviously super important for us to factor in, especially budget. We try to avoid the crowds in July and August in Europe, specifically Italy, so we knew we were going to avoid it that time of year. And we also try to choose shoulder season whenever we can because we'll get the most bang for our buck in some of those destinations, especially when they're a little bit more expensive.
Sometimes we have to skip our bucket list destinations. We really wanted to visit New Zealand and Australia while we were in Southeast Asia because it seemed like, well, that's a short distance. We should be able to make this work. But every time we tried to fix it and fit it in the budget, it just didn't happen. And we had to give up and say, we're just not going to do it this year. it's going to have to be worked out at another time.
South Africa is also one of my top destinations on my bucket list, but it costs so much to get to South Africa and then just connecting through any place there that we just really couldn't put it into our budget for 2024. It's still on our wish list. We're still trying to see where we can squeeze it in, but it definitely didn't happen in 2024.
Another reason we went to Southeast Asia was because of weather. We learned the hard way that it gets cold in Italy. We got a video to show you how cold it really gets. And we knew that if we're in Southeast Asia, we'd be avoiding the chilly weather in Europe, which also plays into our budget of we pack for 3 seasons. We don't want to carry extra clothing that requires winter bundling up or heavy coats. So this was a big piece of the puzzle for us.
And it always is. In fact, someone recently asked, will we be going to the European Christmas markets? And maybe someday, perhaps, I don't know, but it's cold in Europe and we try to avoid that. And it's also really crowded, which is another one of the criteria that tends to keep us away from it.
Yeah, if the crowds are there, there's probably upscale pricing for everything, and we just don't want to fit that into our budget. And we look for special times of year and places. Like we were originally looking at cherry blossom season in Japan in springtime, but it didn't seem to work out with our planning. So we said, well, we'll go for the fall colors and that will work out best. And I looked at the map and said, well, geographic arbitrage says we should go to the nearest place, which is South Korea. But South Korea is really cold that time of year. So we catch those fall colors. We're not going to go to a place and freeze. We switched our plans and said, let's go to Vietnam.
After 7 months in Asia and Southeast Asia, we knew we wanted to head to Europe. Our daughter decided that she wanted to join us in Europe, but she wanted to see Italy for the first time. We were thrilled about it, but she wanted to be there when the weather was warm. Since we knew that we didn't want to be there in July and August, that meant to arrive at the very end of May to early June. Our next criteria is factoring in Schengen time. We really like to spend time in Europe, but there are rules that allow you to stay no more than 90 days in any rolling 180-day period. So we have to track that very carefully. We have 2 videos. One is a 60-second short that gives you all of the information in a very short amount of time. And another one that's a little bit longer that deep dives into exactly how the Schengen zone works. Both are linked below.
And the last factor on our list is geographic arbitrage. It's really important that we don't waste time on flights. If we're in an area, we like to stay in an area. So no long flights if we can possibly avoid it. We knew we were going to be in Japan and then going to Southeast Asia. Looking at all the countries in Southeast Asia, they were very close to each other. It looked like very short trips.
Now, we could spend an entire year and deep dive into every part of one particular part of the world. But really, we want to see a very diverse cross-section in any particular year. So we don't want to stay too long in each particular part of the world.
And this was our first trip to Southeast Asia. So we were concerned about how much time we could spend there. As it is, we have to get adjusted to a new place in the world. Turns out it was pretty good.
We really had a great time. So these are the 6 criteria that we use for travel planning. We'd be curious to know if you have other factors that we should maybe consider as well. We're going to take you step by step through how we planned each of our destinations for 2024. We'll walk you through when we put them on our calendar, and then we'll go through how we actually booked them.
All 26 cities?
No, we're going to just give you the highlights so you don't have to sit through all of that.
We have a lot to talk about in 2024, but to understand how that travel started, we have to go back to 2023 in October, where we started in Japan.
We knew we wanted to visit Southeast Asia, but Kevin was really interested in starting it all off in Japan, so we made that our first destination in October of 2023. That helped us to adjust our timing a little bit for visiting the US in 2023, which we ended up scheduling for immediately beforehand.
We had a plan for a milestone birthday to be in the US for 2024 in July. I wanted to be in Italy for my birthday, so we had a placeholder down there where we figured out where it would be, which would be May.
Based on chasing good weather in Vietnam, we prioritized that after Japan.
And since we're going to be in Southeast Asia, we prioritized Cambodia for Christmas.
Thailand's weather made sense for a visit in February, and it was one of our bucket list destinations.
We wanted to visit South Korea, as we mentioned, but the first opportunity for good weather was April.
We were interested in the Philippines, but we couldn't quite figure out a plan for that, so we put a pin in it for now.
We had friends to meet up with in August in France. We put a placeholder down for mid-June and early July to be in Spain before we left for the US in 2024.
We wanted to see more of Europe, but we needed to be out of the Schengen zone first. And the soonest we could be back in Europe was late October. So we blocked time to be in Sardinia for the month of November.
We knew we wanted to be somewhere warm over Christmas and early 2025, so we put Brazil on our list for December 2024.
We still had a few blanks to fill in, and since Morocco was on my bucket list, we decided to visit in October for cooler weather, and it also gave us the break from Schengen that we needed. We'd intended to visit Albania in 2023, but we skipped it in favor of going to Japan, but it slid perfectly into September, when again we needed to be out of Schengen.
We talked about our daughter who mentioned being interested in visiting Italy in early June, so we slid that time into our Schengen days.
We still had to sort out the rest of our time in Asia. We couldn't decide where to be in the Philippines, so we decided to scrap that for this year. Instead, we went back to Vietnam so we could spend time in Hoi An, which our viewers recommended as someplace we might enjoy more than we did Saigon.
We wanted to give Vietnam more time, so it made sense to go there even though it'd be a little bit of backtracking.
And that left mid-March to mid-April for Taiwan. After going through some chilly weather in March, we decided that maybe being on Sardinia in November might not be our best plan. So we decided to shift it to May 2025.
That left November 2024 as a placeholder. We considered Australia, Turkey, and a series of other places before deciding to start our travels in South America a month earlier than we intended, and we prioritized Argentina. What you'll notice from our planning process is that we don't always book the places we plan to visit right away when we slot them on our calendar. The only things that we do book ahead of time are accommodations that can be refunded up till a month beforehand.
We'll book long-haul flights sooner because those can go up significantly in price. And sometimes that can work against us if flight prices go up significantly, and it might cause us to adjust those plans.
But we also can't afford to book a year's worth of travel in 1 or 2 months, even though we're often in Airbnbs, and many of those will allow us to divide the cost into 3 payments at no charge. It can be fairly costly to book all this at one time.
So for us, managing our cash flow is very important. So let's break down our costs of how we get from one destination to another.
Because we book all our travel and lodging on our Chase Sapphire Reserve card, we do earn points throughout the year, but it usually only covers one long-haul flight or one long stay accommodation, or a combination thereof.
We don't really play the points game. It's time consuming, and it's just not a priority for us.
And unfortunately, some of the things we want to book don't go through the point system very well, especially when we're in places like Southeast Asia, where we just couldn't get the airlines booked through Chase.
Last week, we had an episode about travel gotchas. And if you recall from that video, we talked about how we really don't take repositioning cruises or other cruises to get from one destination to a next.
So how did we get from place to place? And how much did it cost for all that travel?
We took 17 trains between cities in Japan, South Korea, Italy, Spain, and France. But for our 2024 travel year, we didn't take any trains to get between countries. We used almost 91,000 points per person and an additional $113 apiece to get economy plus seats on ANA Airlines from Houston to Japan, which is the most points we've used for one flight. Japan to Vietnam cost $319 per person, but seat fees were an additional $55 per person. The in-country flight from Saigon to Hanoi was $76 per person, which was the second cheapest flight in all of our 2024 travels. Our Hanoi flight to Siem Reap on Vietjet was $83.98 per person. We flew Thai Asia from Siem Reap to Chiang Mai for $173.98 per person, which includes $15 for seats and baggage fees of $29. Vietjet charged us a whopping $90 apiece for baggage and seat assignments, on top of flights costing $136 apiece from Chiang Mai to Da Nang. Vietjet typically has extra fees, and they always weigh our luggage. Our flight to Taipei from Da Nang was $180.87 on China Airlines, and bundled with that is $40 for baggage and $27.50 for seats. We had no idea that half of these discount airlines existed, but Tiger Air Taiwan took us from Taipei to Busan for $183.57 per person. Baggage fees of $37 are included in that total. Seoul to Rome with a layover in Helsinki was our second most expensive flight at $614.74 apiece. And then we took a train to get us to Orvieto, which was our actual destination. Rome to Barcelona was $150.98 per person, and that included a fee of $23 per seat. We're awarding the prize for our most expensive flight to Iberia Airlines, which took us from Madrid to San Francisco for $886.60 apiece. We didn't have a lot of flexibility on the timing for this trip, so we were somewhat stuck, and we really wanted to wrap up our time in Europe in Madrid. We used 58,500 Chase travel points apiece and $38 each to get us from Houston to Lyon. Paris to Tirana was $103.07, and seats were an additional $6 on Ryanair. Getting from Tirana to Marrakesh required a stop in Milan and then a bus to get to an alternate airport. The cost of the first leg was $187 apiece. The shift in airport was worth it because our flight from Milan to Marrakesh was the cheapest flight of the year at only $59 apiece. That doesn't include the transfer bus charge of $22.30 though. This actually makes the flight to Hanoi comparatively cheaper by $5. Morocco to South America began with a flight from Fez to Madrid, which cost just under $80 apiece, but required a hotel night in Madrid and transfers to and from the airport for a total of $154.82 apiece. The next morning, we flew from Madrid to Buenos Aires with a stop in Bogota. We used Chase travel points to offset the cost from Madrid to Buenos Aires. Thanks for joining us, and a special thank you to our Gelato members who help support our channel. One of the best compliments you can give to us is to recommend our videos to your friends and family.
Check out findinggina.com, where we have articles, free downloads, and our free community forum. There's also details about how you can get our behind-the-scenes content.
Until next time.
Until next time.